13, Class 7, Part 1, with the John.
The John. The Johnster? The John.
Is anybody coming through the back that you know of?
No, Jude can't come. Judy can't come. Leonardo's, she's in Langley, so he's not going to be able to. I don't think we'll be seeing much of Leonardo since she moved to Langley.
Are you guys warm enough?
Yeah, I've got a like without thinking sheet.
I might just grab something for mine. I'll just grab a blanket.
I was just gonna ask.
Yeah.
You guys were at the Banyan on. Well, I mean.
Well, we weren't. We had a
but,
band rehearsal
Oh.
that night, or we would have been there.
Yeah.
Were you there?
I was there.
You were there.
Because I didn't do the retreat.
Yeah,
right?
it was.
That's
It
all I
was
got
well attended.
to see.
The band
It was
really
well
packed.
attended. There was much. She was so lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You gonna come next year now?
Yeah.
Nice, Marge. Good, so are we.
Yeah. It was. Yeah. Anyway.
Just blocking my view of the Sharon.
I like that. I like the names.
So do I.
It kind of creates. It allows you to like
Okay, here.
separate yourself from who you think the Sharon is.
It's kind of profound, right?
Yeah.
It can be profound. And the first time I ever heard that was actually, he was a comedian. And he was on a movie, the Todd. He goes, "Oh, the Chad."
Oh, the child.
Goes, "Well, you don't like the Chad?" You saying hi to the Chad? And it was really funny. But then later I thought, wow, that's really cool, the Chad. You know, it really means a lot. So maybe they were sneaking that in. Maybe he was just being funny. Who knows? We'll never know, will we? Maybe we will know someday.
That was Charlie's Angels, wasn't it?
Yeah. Here he comes.
Who's this?
The Bubs, that's who it is. Whiskey, the Bubs cats.
So we're going to start off with a little kirtan, and Mishi's going to lead us. Nothing like singing to get us ready for all kinds of events, yeah. You doing gate gate?
Yeah.
It's going to be like a rock concert, Marge.
This is the one that I work on within my head this evening. I hope so. It's the hot song. Yeah. Gate, para, samgate.
Gate, para, sangate.
Gate, para, samgate.
Gate, para, sangate.
Booty soha, booty soha, booty soha, booty soha.
sit with your eyes closed or open and just feel the shift in your body and quite possibly your mind from the prana, from singing, opening your heart. Maybe you can touch into that feeling, which you may or may not have had when you're singing. But what I'm referring to is the spontaneity of just going with the moment and not doubting yourself, not thinking about other things, not needing to be somewhere else or wishing for something else. And that maybe in that time you could have a sense of what living in the present moment would be like all the time. There's something about singing, especially devotional singing, something about singing that opens up the heart, and when the heart opens, we're more relaxed, we're more wise, we're kinder, more loving, more accepting. There's so many qualities to an open heart. So many beautiful qualities that all really Buddhist path is really about. It's really reaching a place like that you can be in that state, whether you're singing or whether you're in a traffic jam, late for work, or whether you're in a situation that maybe someone else would assume was disappointing to you. But if your heart is open, you may not be experiencing it that way. It's one of the reasons why chanting and mantra can be very helpful. One of the reasons. Because it takes your concentration, it moves your wings, and it can open your heart. So we'll stay in this kind of state, and then we'll do our opening prayers. And since Mishi led the kirtan, we'll also get Mishi to lead us in opening prayers.
Sashi
Well, here we are, class 7. I mean, what if you had the time? What if you made the time for yourself to, do a little chant in the morning before work? It would take like 5 minutes. Maybe, but it probably would lead to more. We'll probably get into it. You could probably sing to a tape or play. They have things where you can have a tone and chant to a tone, or just sing to music. I know a guy who's Dee knows, who his like main practice was he would pick a song that, from the radio or from his library that he thought, okay, today's going to be about this song. And he would play it repeatedly in the morning, and then play it during the day, and he would remind himself, to think about the lyrics of that song all day. I thought it was a cool practice. Because this is a very heady course, this debate course. Interesting. It's a heady course to try and get us out of our heads. Or to keep it look. Yeah, because if you get really good, at Buddhist logic, then what happens is you get really good at, or you start to understand how much it is that you don't actually know. And that gets exciting. See, it gets exciting when you start understanding that you don't know something. You don't know, actually, I don't really know what's going on. I don't really know what reality is. All these things I've been assuming, I've just been logically taking apart with my Buddhist logic and all my practice. And then you're open, right? Then something happens and you been open to something else. Because, what's more boring than having already decided this is what this thing is, right? And then you might as well just shoot it with a gun and just kill the thing. This is what this relationship is, right? This is who this person is. I was talking to someone today, not that long ago, about how we can be in the middle of our Buddhist practice, we're so-called Buddhists, and then we could interact with people that we've known for a long time, and then we just end up treating them in ways that are like old habits. Well, I know for myself even, like a person that I see every once in a while that I had a relationship with, it's really hard to not just slide back into an old way of behaving around them and perceiving them. Because it's just a habit. It's like a karmic force. It's a karmic wind in the mind that is associated for some reason with that person. Because, why is it? Why is it that we see one thing one way and another thing another? Right? Mr. Whiskey, that's his name, Whiskey. And he's like, like there was one cat who came here and it was just like, it was a breeze, right? He came in and just like, he owned the house right away. He was like a thug. Right? He just came in, he was like, yeah, this is my house. But this guy has been like really, really skittish and afraid for 2 days now. And this is the first day that he's been coming around, right? So he has some kind of karmic propensity to be in a new situation and be freaked out. So until that karma changes, he'll be forced into treating all situations, new situations like that. But the other dude, he didn't have that karma. He just like walked right in and he just owned the joint right away. And there's something about needing an object, right? The mind needs an object to associate itself with that thing and then have a reality, or have, like the John needs other things to exist. Right? The John needs to relate to things in order to, like, for there even to be a John. And then who's to say why it is that a person could have the perception of seeing themselves and like fall in love with another person? Why not the neighbor? Right? Why not the neighbor? It's very interesting. And then so there's certain people that trigger certain karmas. So if, then I meet someone from 10 years ago, if I haven't completely shifted that kind of karma in my mind, I'm going to instantaneously, that karma that they allowed me to experience is instantly going to come up. And it's so, like, we know all that from family, right? The things that seem the most self-existent in our lives. Partners, teachers, family, brothers, sisters, mom, dad. And that's why we see so many people, like, I think this happens a lot in small towns too. Everyone knows who everyone is, and that's what they are. Yeah, that's just John being John again. He's always doing that. He's been doing that for 30 years. He's not going to change. That's who he is. And then we get stuck. We get stuck in these perceptions. Then we phone dad or mom, or we Skype dad or mom, and we just can't help it. Because we don't think in the moment to apply the fact that we don't know. We don't know if they're a Buddha. They could be a Buddha, we can't prove they're not. We don't know if they've seen emptiness or not. We don't know what kind of things going on in their mind. But, so what if we could live outside of that whole thing? That's what this is all about. This is all about. All this like cranking the head around these things is just so that we could bust it wide open and then be with everybody that we meet just open. Yeah, here I am. Here I am. You're an awesome being. I love you. I don't know how you see me or how you see yourself, but this is what's happening right now. And tomorrow could be totally different. I'm totally ready for you to completely change on me. And that's okay. I'm not gonna build my whole reality dependent on some way that I'm expecting you to behave. Because I know better. And until we know better, that's just what we do. It's just natural human nature. It's what we do. We get into a relationship and okay, this is going to provide me with this. You're going to behave like this. I'm going to behave like this, and we'll happily, hopefully, we'll build this relationship and. And then people get confused when things change. Because people grow. I mean, the idea, you'd think, of a healthy relationship would be two people come together and help each other grow. So then we should expect the other person to change. We should expect the other person to, hopefully, flower, But if we're stuck on a certain perception, it will be very hard for us to allow them to change and hard for us to accept it when they do. And hard for us to change ourselves and then be comfortable with it when it's like, okay, I'm not into that anymore. I don't want to, go to this place with you every Wednesday now, or whatever it is we used to do for 10 years. I'm done with that now. I had a friend in high school that was like, I think he was in love with me, but he had this thing where we played tennis every, I think it was Thursday afternoon, and he was like, that was his thing, and I like playing tennis as much as the next person, I guess, but he was really into tennis, and I remember there was one time when I was getting involved in other things, and he was really, really freaking out because we weren't going to play tennis. And one night he was crying. We were all out, for drinks, and he just started sobbing and said, "What about tennis on a Thursday?" Right? And it's just his whole world fell apart because I wasn't going to play tennis on Thursday. And this is what we can be like. Because we assume so many things. We assume so many things. God, wouldn't it be nice for just to be free of it? Like, wouldn't it be kind of scary and weird and awesome? That's the real adventure. That's the real adventure. It's like that, Can I be present and open with the world and the people that are in it? That's like the greatest adventure of all time, Because it's easy to go on an adventure, put money and go out and climb some mountain, but you're still the same person. You could go there and have all these things, and maybe that could change you, but how much more of an adventure would it be if you had that mind with you? I've been to rock concerts. Where 1 second, and actually used these principles. Like 1 second thinking, oh yeah, it's a concert and that was cool. That sounded like some Chinese. But yeah, no, I've been at concerts where like really packed, and I'd be saying, well, like they haven't played my favorite song yet or something, and the sound's not that great, and light show's kind of mediocre, and I paid $100, and and then just I just remembered, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not the way I'm supposed to be seeing things. And then just a little switch of like, I can't prove that this is not Buddha paradise. I can't prove that there's not a bunch of people here in like Tushita heaven coming to see some amazing Buddhas, like laying it down for everyone's benefit. And just that little shift in perception just does something to your prana. Where your thoughts go, where your prana goes, that can go right to your heart, and then boom, it's happened many times. Instantaneously, it's a completely different experience, and suddenly it's all wonder and awe, and everyone around you becomes extraordinary, and just because I entertain the thought that maybe it's actually different than what I think, and then suddenly you're open. So that's the whole point of this. It's not to be like intelligently correct. It's to have an open heart. In this class, we're talking about relationship and contradiction. So how two objects relate to each other, or how two objects contradict each other. And it will be in relation to, it will always be in relation to proofs, statements, proving like emptiness or the lack of something. These are always going to be about proving the ideas of Buddhism, mainly proving the lack of self-existence to things. So that's our topic, contradiction and relationship. That's the cat scratching the cardboard. Yeah. Say Gelndrel? Gelndrel? So it's a study of Gelndrel. So Geln is when two objects are contradictory, and Drel is when two objects share a relationship. So we're going to talk about the differences. What makes things contradict each other? Like what do things have to, like what qualities do they have to have in order to like contradict each other? So first of all, we need to talk about they have to be distinct from one another. So they have to be two different things. Like me and this clock are distinct from each other. And remember, we're in the logic school, right? We're not going down the rabbit hole of Majjhimika and saying, well, are you really? We're going to hang out at that level and they say we're distinct from each other because the main names are different. You see me, you think John. You see this, you think clock. Maybe you think clock. So then we're distinct from each other. That's one of the things.
If things have different names, that means they're distinct?
Well, like, for instance, how can I put that? If the main name, so they say if the main thing that you name it are different, which is just a fancy way of saying like your perception is, I hold this up, you don't go, John, right? There's something different that you associate with that. You associate clock with it. And so that's what distinguishes me from the clock, nominally speaking, is that. Okay. So that's the first thing you have to have in order for there to be a contradiction. Is there has to be two objects. They can't be the same object. And they have to exist. You can't compare an existing thing to a non-existing thing and have them contradict because one of them doesn't exist. You need two objects, two existing objects. The second thing for two objects to be in contradiction is there should be no, say, shitunpa. There should be no shitunpa. So shitun means one thing that is both things. And mipa means there is no shitunpa. So you can't. So you put it together. So the ultimate meaning of something that's in contradiction, it means two objects distinct from one another, and there is no one thing which can be both things at the same time. That's confusing. The ultimate meaning of contradiction. Two objects distinct from one another, and there can be no one thing, and there is no one thing which can be both things at the same time. So that's like the basic meaning of contradiction.
Like auto and car.
Yeah,
That's the shitupa. That's the
yeah, yeah. You can't use exactly. Yeah, that's a nice example. Auto and car. Yeah, they can't be contradicting because they're really the same thing. You know.
So the third quality is that there's no shitumpa, and shitumpa is.
What's the second quality? There's no shitumpa. There's only two. There was
I
one.
think so they both had to exist. They both had to be separate.
Well, them both having to exist falls under two distinct objects because you can't have two distinct objects if one doesn't exist.
Okay.
So that wasn't really a specific quality; it was just part of that. Yeah. So, and there can be a two-way contradiction or a one-way contradiction. Okay. For example, let me think. Actually, let's not talk about that right now. That's more like in relationship. You can have a two-way relationship or a one-way relationship. Like a two-way relationship would be it goes both ways. Like changing things and made things. If you're a changing thing, then you must be a made thing. If you're a made thing, you must be a changing thing. That's a two-way relationship. But we're not talking relationships right now.
But isn't that a matumpa?
Hmm?
To be one is to be the other.
That's coming. That's in relationship. We kind of covered some of this already, but this is like the official class. That's in relationship. We're talking about contradiction, which really I shouldn't have brought it up right now because in a one-way relationship would be Toyotas or cars and Toyotas, right? To be a car, to be a Toyota means you're a car, but to be a car doesn't mean you're a Toyota. So it only goes one way, not two ways. So we're going to talk about two kinds of contradictions. And there's a cool implication to this. Say, Penzin Pangal. Penzin means mutually, and Pang means eliminate, and Gel means contradiction. So the kind of contradiction where two things are mutually exclusive. For example, changing thing and unchanging thing. Right? You can't know one thing that can be both. There can be no one. So a changing thing can never be an unchanging thing. They're contradictory. Like, red and white, or heat and cold. Like these kinds of things where you can't be heat and be cold at the same time. So here's some examples. Mutually exclusive contradictions. One of them is when one of them is present, it automatically excludes the possibility of the other one's presence. And this is kind of the important one. When one of them is present, it automatically must exclude the possibility of the other one's presence. Can anyone think of a way that that would be very good? If we're talking about a mental thing, a movement of mind. Well, you could say that distraction is non-existent. Yeah, that's in this one. I like that one. Yeah. Wisdom and ignorance, that's another good one, right?
So it's like an oxymoron, basically.
Kind of, yeah, because if you're really understanding very well the lack of self-existence to this object, and while you're considering that, you can't have ignorance about the clock while you're doing that at the same time. So like the wisdom pushes out the ignorance. They can't coexist. They and if you want to get technical about it, we're talking about moments of mind, right? So you could have a few moments of mind where you're with the wisdom, and then it could flop into, okay, I've forgotten about that. And you're back to, like, I don't understand the emptiness of the clock, or of this object. But they can't exist at the same time, which is very good news. Another example of that would be like the classical Buddhist example is a water pitcher. Lumpa, right? Water pitcher. A water pitcher, or let's keep using the clock. The clock and everything which is not a clock. Those things contradict each other. That's an example, right? And that kind of covers everything in the universe, right? This object and everything that is not this object covers all things in the universe. Yes.
Oh, I was just thinking about love and anger.
Love and anger. Oh, good. Let's talk about love and anger.
Well, when you're feeling loving thoughts, you can't have an angry thought because it's just love.
Mm-hmm.
But you can flip in and out of it.
Sure. Yeah, love can take over, anger's gone. Anger can take over, love is gone.
Love and fear.
Love and fear, maybe, yeah. Yeah, anger and fear are very closely related. Maybe fear is the driver. Who knows? Maybe fear is the driver of the pickup truck and anger's inside and just waiting. Waiting to jump out.
It's like Yoda said.
What did Yoda say?
He said, fear leads to anger, anger leads to the dark side.
Ooh.
No, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to the dark side.
Is it suffering in that?
Maybe there's suffering in there.
So that one was where one thing can't be the other. And which, like, you could say wisdom and ignorance, love, hate, hot, cold. And those are like things that can't be the same thing. But the next one is more like what I was just talking about, where they're so a contradiction where two things are diametrically opposed. It's the second one. And that's more kind of like what we were talking about when wisdom pushes out ignorance, where there's a process. There's a process. In Scripture, the lighthearted example for the kids in Scripture is an owl and a crow. Apparently, owls and crows, they really don't get along. So if a crow is on a branch and an owl lands, the crow will just take off. They don't get along. But the real example in Scripture is a negative personal quality and a spiritual antidote to that quality. So just what we were just talking about. And so there's two kinds of ways of looking at it. One of them is it's direct contradiction where one can't be the other, like ignorance can't be wisdom. But then there's also where it works in degrees, where eventually like your wisdom increases, and eventually the ignorance that we have just gets pushed out, even though they're both kind of in our mind stream, back and forth, but the wisdom eventually gets stronger and stronger. It's like there's not room for the both of you, in the town, right? And then wisdom gets stronger and stronger, and then ignorance has to like move out to the suburbs, and then finally can never come back. And kind of like what Sharon was saying, if you have a problem with laziness, then a death awareness meditation would be the antidote to that. And it's not like you could be doing a death awareness meditation and not still have laziness, but if you're over time, the death awareness meditation would push out the laziness, hopefully, and then you wouldn't be lazy anymore, and you'd be like getting into your practice. There's a really cool meditation actually that they do that to help you, like if we're attracted to the desires of the senses, and we're all strung out on fulfilling our sense desires. There's a meditation that you do where you sit down and you imagine like a tiny dot on your forehead, and then you visualize this dot beginning to rot, and the skin starts to peel away, and you start rotting, and your bones start to rot, and it gets bigger, and you start to all like get all smelly and rotten, and then you expand it out, and then too it's like my clothes just kind of, your clothes just start disintegrating, and you're becoming a corpse, and then the cushions start to do what they will do, which is decompose, right? And then the floor starts to rot, everything gets rotten, and the walls collapse, and you keep on going until it's out in pretty soon all of Vancouver is what it will be one day, just like a ruin, and you keep going out, everything's in ruin, everything's rotten, decomposed, then you get to the ocean and you dry up the ocean, like the ocean will be one day. You dry up the ocean, and then the whole planet is just this, Armageddon. And then you bring it all back. Right back to the dog in the forehead. And that until you're, back to your normal self. And that's supposed to be a great meditation to get over being pulled around by desire for the senses, pleasing the senses. And so that's an example of how that antidote will eventually push out the desire for the senses. But it probably wouldn't happen instantly. As soon as you started it, you wouldn't be all of a sudden, I got no desire for the senses. You'd have to do it enough times. It's like, another way to put it would be, two things which conflict each other in such a way that they act against the continued existence of each other. Two things which conflict each other in such a way that they act against the continued existence of the other. So if we do our practice, wisdom conflicts ignorance in such a way that its continued existence, it will push out the continued existence of ignorance.
And itself, and wisdom.
No, wisdom will remain. It's like wisdom will remain and ignorance will be gone, because wisdom will have pushed out the continued existence of ignorance.
Oh, so one has to triumph over the other.
Yeah, yeah. The antidote. The antidote must triumph. And it will, truth, what do they say? Truth is, ignorance is standing on one leg and truth standing on two legs. There's no contest. Right? Just knockout. So do you see the difference between those two kinds of contradictions? Where one is over time and one is just, you can't be a changing thing and a changing thing. You can't be wisdom and ignorance. That's one kind. And then the other kind is like where wisdom over time pushes ignorance out. Or another example might be, okay, you can't be hot and cold, or you can't be an element that is heat and an element that is cold at the same time. But you could be in a room that is cold, and you turn a furnace on, and the element of heat begins to come in. And over time, cold is pushed out of the room and hot takes over. And that would be an example of the heat contradicts the cold and grows until it pushes out the continued existence of the cold. So that's another way of looking at it. Does that make sense? So those are two kinds of contradictions. So you can see how like hot and cold and ignorance and wisdom, they're mutually exclusive. So they're both. But at the same time, they will also work as one will take over the other and push the other one out. They can't coexist that way.
Or like any emotion then maybe, like sadness or anger or happiness or...
Yeah, it could be taken anyway. It could be that anger comes in and takes over joy. Maybe you're having joy and all of a sudden something happens and anger begins to well up and then joy has to leave town. Right? And it's all about the anger. And some people, that happens to people. That happens to people. God, it's really sad, They have this life and they're going along and they've got their relationship and this and that, and then something happens, like the wife takes the kid and just like disappears. Never did, and the guy comes home from work one day and the house is empty. And then anger comes in and begins to push out the joy. And lots of people, the joy never returns. Joy can only, because anger is so strong in them, and resentment and bitterness is so strong, and blame is so strong in them, that joy can only really come in and flit around a little bit, and little moments of joy, and then it doesn't have the strength. Until something happens, right? Until something happens. Something happens to change it. Hopefully wisdom will come and make a real change. So now that was contradiction. Now we're talking about relationships. There are two kinds of relationship. And we've talked a bit about this. Relationship of identity, which was what you were saying earlier, to be one thing is to be another, right?
That's a relationship of identity.
Yeah, relationship of identity. To be one thing is automatically to be the other thing. And it can work one way or both ways, like we talked about the car and the Toyota. It can work one way. It can be a one-way relationship or a two-way relationship. Right? To be a car doesn't mean you're a Toyota, but to be a Toyota means you're a car. So to be a Toyota is automatically means you're a car. Or like a changing thing and a thing which is made, right? And if you're a changing thing, you're automatically a made thing. If you're a made thing, you're automatically a changing thing. That's a two-way relationship. good example of a relationship such that one thing is automatically to be the other thing is the pen, ready? Or let's say the clock. The clock and the opposite of all that the clock is not. The clock and the opposite of all the clock is not.
That's still the clock.
Still the clock. So to be one, to be the opposite of all things the clock is not is the same thing as to be the clock. But there's a different mental process. You get at it in a different way. So if I say the clock, and then I say to you, the opposite of all the clock is not, you don't instantly go clock, you go, and then you go clock. Right? So they're the same thing, but it's a different mental process. And that's it's very, very healthy to get good at thinking like that, to understand emptiness. The opposite of all the clock is not. And if you remember, that's called dokpa, and it's very in this school, in the Lago school, they actually say that's how we perceive things. They say we're running around and negating everything that this thing isn't, and then we're coming up with the clock. And some Buddhist schools say that's emptiness, which is not correct.
So you say that's what, sorry, can I just say that?
Yeah.
So that's what would be helpful, is if we thought about the opposite of what the clock is not first, and did that process before we then saw the clock. It would be helpful if we did that process, but you're saying that they say that's what we do anyway.
Well, they say that's what we do anyways, but there's a difference between doing that anyways and doing it consciously.
Right.
Yeah. Getting your head around double negatives is very good. It completely changes. It just, you feel it, right? It's like someone's doing a break stand in your head. It's like suddenly it's like, oh, that's different. Double negatives. They're very, because how do we talk about something that isn't there, right? That's the thing. How do you talk about something that isn't there? You got to go through these double negatives.
I'm trying to do it with a person. Like the opposite of what John is not.
Right. That's me.
But then that's just the opposite of not, it's not everybody else. It's, yeah, okay.
Right? Yeah. Right? When you perceive the John, you're just perceiving the exclusion of all the John is not.
Which is hard with a person because it's changing all the time.
Everything is
Everything's
changing.
changing all the time, but the clock's changing all the time, but we
Yeah.
can't see it as much as the person is changing all the time.
Right.
So how come we're constantly on our toes, like having to look at the opposite of what the John is not, or the opposite of what the Marge is not, like all the time?
Sounds exhausting.
It's coming from this mind.
The windy road in there.
Sure is. I should be straight.
When you perceive the exclusion of all the clock is not. Let's keep doing this, John. I like it. When you perceive the exclusion of all the John is not, you're perceiving the exclusion of all that is not the exclusion of all that the John is not. You gotta just play with it at home.
I gotta hear this debate.
So the second kind of relationship is a cause and effect relationship. The relationship of a thing and the thing which it came from. So this, we can understand that in one way. Okay, like the orange came from the seed. But it's harder to understand it in the way to talk about it. Because this is not a two-way relationship. This is a one-way relationship, and I'll explain it to you, right? Because you get into this nasty debate, right? By the time the orange is there, or let's go to the tree, right? By the time the tree is there, the seed is gone. So you can't have two distinct objects. So there's no two objects, so you can't have a relationship. But they say, but you can describe it over a period of time. Right? Conceptually, we can call the thing a result. So, right, conceptually, because when we're calling a thing a result, the instant that your mind conceptualizes something as a result, you're instantly conceptualizing the cause. It's just, and we perceive it as happening over time, right? It's technically true that the seed is gone, but we can still, like, for example, we can speak of Marge over the whole period of her life, right? And we could say, in her whole life, she's only been in this very class one time. This one time. So even though all the marches, all the marching marches from millisecond to millisecond don't exist anymore, we can say, because we can look at marches like over time, we can say, okay, Marge has only been in this class once. Because we can still consider her over the length of her life. And it's a conceptualization. So here's an example of something that shares a one-way cause and effect relationship is any working thing and the working thing in the moment after it. So we talked about this before, but we'll still use the clock, right? Maybe we should just use the John because it's a person, okay? So, and I'm a working thing, okay, in many ways, but I'm a functioning working thing. I'm a changing thing. I'm a main thing. The John, the concept, the John, okay. So the John that exists in the John that exists in the first millisecond flops over and becomes the John that exists in the second millisecond. So they say that is those two Johns are sharing a relationship of cause and effect, as in the first millisecond of the John was the cause of the second millisecond of the John. But it doesn't work the other way. Because you can't say, you can't say the first millisecond shares a one-way relationship with the second millisecond, because the second millisecond doesn't exist yet. It's only the second millisecond that shares a relationship with the first millisecond.